Okay, let's make a start. First of all, I want to say a big thank you for those attending the webinar today on getting ready for GDPR faster with intelligent data profiling. We're very excited to be bringing this to you, and we have a great array of people wanting to speak to you about this. So we've got three panelists today. Myself, I'm Simon Cole. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Automated Intelligence. We have Katinka from Microsoft with us as well, who's the Partner Business Development Manager for Microsoft, and also Eamon O'Connor, who's Head of Pre-Sales for Automated Intelligence. What we want to do is take 45 minutes of your time to just talk about GDPR, a little overview of what it is, and then we're going to look at it from a Microsoft perspective, and then look at it from an automated intelligence perspective, showing you some of the capability we think will really enhance how you're dealing with this as an opportunity, rather than necessarily the challenge that a lot of people are seeing it. So what we're going to do now is just have a look at GDPR and talk through what it is and bring that up to date. So I'm sure everybody is aware of it, everybody's talking about it, it's a big hot topic at the minute. So it is the new legislation. It's coming into force in 343 days. We seem to be updating this slide an awful lot every day, bringing it down. It's getting closer all the time. And the difference from what we currently had from a Data Protection Act is that this is a set of regulations applied across the European Union, affecting anybody that is handling data related to individuals within the EU. So it's very pervasive, and it's going to go right across every organization, and everybody needs to care about this because the challenge is there, and there are reasonably meaty fines, and there is a reasonably meaty risk of non-compliance. But we see this as not just around avoiding the fines and avoiding the risks that are associated with it, but a real opportunity to enhance our business processes and to move into a new way of thinking around this. So let's have a look at it in a little bit more detail. There are 7 principles associated with GDPR, and looking at these all have an implication and an opportunity. And first of all, the first one is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. And we've got to be able to look after people's data in a lawful, fair, and transparent manner in relation to any individual subject, so that they can be assured that we are acting as good, honest brokers of their information. In terms of purpose limitation, it's really about why are we collecting this information. We have to be explicit about why we're doing it and have it for a legitimate purpose and no other reason. So for a lot of us, we're going to have to look at why we're holding data and make sure that that data is being maintained for the purposes we intended it to be captured, and ensuring that that is in the public interest if we're keeping it for longer than we might ordinarily keep. When we look at data minimization, we've got to make sure that all data we hold is adequate, that it's relevant and limited to that which are necessary in relation to the purpose, again, for which we're holding that data. From an accuracy perspective, the data must be accurate and must be kept up to date, and we must make reasonable steps to ensure that that information is accurate and that we're keeping only the information that we should be doing, and that information that we don't need is properly erased from our platform. From a storage limitation perspective, it's really about keeping data for as long as we need and making sure that it is kept only for those purposes and not kept thereafter, unless that's for specific archival purposes that are subject to the historical and public interest reasons. In terms of integrity and confidentiality, all personal data must be processed that it ensures that it is kept secure and that it is kept confidential, so that it is not divulged or made available to anybody that shouldn't have access to that. And the final one, I think, is the key one, that the organization and the controller shall be responsible for all data and be able to demonstrate that they have complied with these principles. So there's some challenges in there in terms of how we as organizations have to adopt and have to rethink how we manage information around GDPR. And we think some of the opportunities around this are really going to help organizations move to a new level in terms of how we govern information, not just thinking about GDPR as effectively the stick with which we can be beaten, but we think there's a great opportunity to look at this as a carrot to drive our organizations into a better way of managing information right across the stack. Everything we do as part of automated intelligence is really in keeping and in line with Microsoft. All of our technology is based on the Microsoft stack, and we're really delighted to have Katinka Aranisia with us today to talk about this from a Microsoft perspective. And we're just going to hand over now to Katinka, and she's going to take us through this from a Microsoft point of view.
So thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. So as mentioned, I'm just going to cover off a little bit about how Microsoft sees GDPR, the commitments that we've made around it, and how we recommend our customers to think about GDPR compliance, as well as the work that we're doing with our partners. But before I do that, I just wanted to set a little bit of context on why we have something like the General Data Protection Regulation. So data has emerged as a huge asset recently for both businesses and individuals, and we really are on the cusp of a data revolution. So I think the estimation is that at the moment we're generating 2.5 quintillion bytes of data per day, which I don't know what a quintillion is, but for context, that is apparently more grains of sand than there exists on every beach in the entire world. And this data revolution and advancement in technology is really generating some very positive outcomes for individuals, and it's helping businesses to meet the needs of their customers in really new and improved ways. So AI, as a Microsoft partner, works with customers to help them maximize the value that they get from their data. For example, with organizations like DEFRA, where they've been using Azure to help DEFRA gain insights into their data and essentially continually assess its value to reduce costs, to automate data categorization, and then ultimately that helps ensure compliance with things like the General Data Protection Regulation. So when it comes to data and technology, we're actually seeing new classes of businesses emerge that essentially pivot their entire business model around data and technology. So this includes some of the most successful companies in recent years, including Uber, that many people in urban environments rely on for transportation, but in fact doesn't own a fleet of cars. Or Facebook, which for better or for worse, many people rely on to consume their news, despite the fact that actually Facebook produces no content. So these are really data and technology companies. But although data is empowerment, obviously with great power comes great responsibility. And this is something that Microsoft has kind of recognized and embraced through its own digital transformation and move to cloud services. Because fundamentally we recognize that businesses, users, and partners aren't going to embrace our technology, or not going to embrace our cloud unless they trust it and they trust Microsoft. So we have been a leader in embracing and ensuring that our cloud services adhere to compliance standards for a while. And GDPR is no different. So we have actually committed that all of our cloud services are going to be GDPR compliant by the time enforcement begins in May 2018. Now, as I'm sure everyone will appreciate, this is a hugely complex process. So we have also said that as we go through this journey ourselves, we will continually share our own insights and how we think that these insights can help our customers and our partners prepare. And as we go, we are going to work with partners like AI, who can augment our own insights, our own capabilities with their own services to help companies meet their policy, people, process, and technology goals as they relate to GDPR. So a very brief recap, what the General Data Protection Regulation is and what we see as some of the most significant changes. So as already mentioned, the GDPR will impose new rules on organizations that offer goods and services to people in the EU, or that collect and analyze data tied to EU residents. And really this is all about enhancing personal privacy rights and ultimately increasing the duty on organizations for protecting data. As part of this, we see the introduction of mandatory breach reporting, and we do see significantly increased penalties for non-compliance. So the key changes that the GDPR addresses, again, firstly, this is all about personal privacy. So under GDPR, individuals will have the right to not only access their personal data, but to correct errors in it, to erase it, to object to its processing, and they will also have the right to export their personal data, should they wish. Organizations are going to need to think about the controls and the notification processes that they have in place. So firstly, do they have adequate security to protect the personal data that they hold? Secondly, do they have the ability to notify the relevant authorities in the event of a personal data breach? Do they think about obtaining the appropriate consents for processing data up front? And are they keeping the necessary detailed records on how they are processing data? Policies are also going to need to be more transparent. So organizations will need to provide a clear notice of data collection. They'll have to outline the reasons why they're processing the data and the use cases, and they will have to have defined data retention and also deletion policies. In preparing for GDPR, there is going to have to be investment made in both technology and training. So organizations will need to think about the privacy training that they're providing, whether they're updating and auditing their data policies. Some organizations will need to employ a data protection officer. And then finally, organizations will also have to create and manage compliant vendor contracts as they relate to data processing. So what does this mean in practice? Well, for us as organizations and also individuals, we should expect to see stricter controls on where personal data is stored and how it's used. As a result of GDPR, we should also see improved data governance tools for transparency, record keeping, and reporting. And then finally, we should see improved data policies that provide control to the data subject and ensure lawful processing. So I said before that Microsoft will continually release its own insights as they relate to GDPR, but we have already made some recommendations on things that customers should consider as they prepare for GDPR compliance. The first is to think about the cloud as a means of simplifying their privacy journey. The second is to think about the tools that they have at their disposal to uncover the risks that they have in relation to GDPR and start to take action. And then the final piece is to begin leveraging guidance from GDPR experts. So digging into those a little bit. So we believe that with the cloud, an organization should have the ability to centralize and protect their data and to comply with regulation. So firstly, by centralizing processing in a single cloud system, we think that data management, governance, classification, and oversight is going to be simplified. Secondly, cloud services, such as the Microsoft Cloud Services, use industry-leading encryption and security technology, which should provide enhanced protection for data. And then finally, with the cloud, organizations should be able to streamline their compliance. So Microsoft on the Trust Center already publishes the complex and internationally recognized standards that its cloud services will comply with. So this should help organizations meet their own requirements, including new requirements such as the facilitation of requests by data subjects. In terms of the uncovering risk and taking action bit, I'll revert to this piece in a little while, but as Microsoft, we've begun to communicate how we see our technologies and how we believe that they can help customers identify the risks that they have and ultimately mitigate them. And the first area that we see this being in and where most customers would begin is simply the discovery of the data that they hold across their systems. So in the Microsoft Technology Toolset, we have capabilities that can help customers discover and catalog their data sources, capabilities that will increase visibility and auditing, and then finally capabilities such as, for example, e-discovery that can help customers identify where their personal data is residing across their devices, their applications, and their platforms. Secondly, we see Microsoft technologies as being able to play a role in access governance and processing. So we have capabilities that can help enforce use policies and access controls across various systems, that can help simplify compliance through the classification of data, and that can help customers respond to data requests and also their transparency requirements. And finally, we see Microsoft Cloud Services as being able to help with the protection of data through its entire lifecycle, for example, through the protection of user credentials with risk-based conditional access, through the safeguarding of data with some of our built-in encryption technologies, and then finally through some of our security tool sets that, given that we will have to operate in an assumed breach environment, can help customers detect and rapidly respond to any intrusions and vulnerabilities. And the last step I mentioned is really leveraging guidance from experts. So on the GDPR landing page of the Microsoft Trust Center, we have already published a number of white papers and webinars with our Chief Legal Counsel about our own experiences and views to date. This will continuously get updated, but at the same time, we are continuing to work with and assist our partner community, such as Automated Intelligence, to help them deliver their own services and products that ease a customer's journey to GDPR compliance. So I said before that I was kind of going to give a different view as well of that second point around uncovering risk. So when we think about the Microsoft cloud and indeed on-premises portfolio and how it relates to GDPR, the capability alignment that we've begun to do really traces the feature set of those products back to 4 core capabilities that we see as being relevant to GDPR. The first is discovery, so tools that help a customer identify what personal data they have and where it is, because how could you be compliant with GDPR if you don't know what personal data you hold and where it sits? The second piece is capabilities that help with management, so that would govern, firstly give insight into who can access that data and then help customers lock that down and govern it. The third piece is technologies that assist with protection, so protecting against data breaches, but again with that assumed breach environment, if a data breach occurs, giving an organization the ability to detect that and respond rapidly. And then the final piece is around reporting, so technologies that can help customers with keeping the required documentation, that can help them with managing data requests, and again, that can help with that breach notification process to the relevant authority. And this is really a continuous cycle that we see, so while many organizations will invest effort upfront in meeting the requirements of GDPR, it also has to be a continual review and assessment process. So I'm almost at the end of this, and again, if you're interested, on the Microsoft Trust Center, we do talk about how each of the kind of services that you see here can relate back to those 4 points. But just before I hand over, I'm going to give a little bit of an example on how we see this across the Azure platform. So on the discovery side, for example, Azure Search, if it's integrated into hosted applications, can help to locate personal data. On the management side, Azure can help customers securely manage access to their data, applications, and other resources. On the protection side, Azure does rely and employ advanced encryption, cryptography, and monitoring. It can also help restore data availability through recovery and then geo-redundant storage options. And then finally, when it comes to reporting, Azure can help deliver transparency and then tamper-resistant insights with its activity logs, as well as essentially having the catalog of the compliance and privacy documentation available for the service. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Simon Cole from Automated Intelligence, who's going to take a closer look at how AI Datalift, which is powered by Microsoft Azure, can help customers in preparing for GDPR.
Thank you very much, Katinka. That's been really useful and very informative as well. We realize that compliance is nothing new. We've all had to deal with various requirements, various things we need to do over time, and GDPR is just one of these. And certainly here at AI, we have been working for many years to help organizations meet compliance regulations, and we see GDPR as just the next version of that. But everything you're doing today in terms of looking at security, understanding risk, looking at policy, data protection, these are things that we have all been dealing with. And we help organizations do this in 4 ways and get 4 benefits effectively from this capability. First of all, when we look at reducing costs, we see that budgets are increasingly under pressure by organizations. And when we look at storage and data and how much information we're keeping, and often how much information we're overkeeping, we believe there is a significant opportunity to reduce costs and bring some benefit back to the organization. And again, GDPR is a great way to do that. And we'll look at this in a couple of minutes as well. Also, in terms of understanding the risk and managing the risk, so we do have obligations within our industries that we have to meet. And again, if we can help people do that, it again aids a better information management platform. We also need to look at providing proof, and this is a key thing that we highlighted earlier in terms of accountability for GDPR. that the organization is responsible for this, but not only that, they're responsible that they have to demonstrate compliance as well. So it's not just the point of saying we are compliant, but that demonstration is going to be very key. But we think one of the real benefits for this is the productivity gains that can be met as well. So when we look at organizations and we look at streamlining the data that an organization holds, this can have a great and very positive impact on data, not only its mobility given the lower volumes of it, but the efficiency of searching for that data and the relevance of the data to the user when they find it. And we do this in three key ways. We like to break it up. We look at analyzing information, so looking at what an organization has and understanding the opportunity and the risk within that. We then look at optimizing their information. So that's where we actually do something proactive with the data in terms of cleansing it, maybe transforming the data, looking at categorization techniques, and this is where some of the power of Azure as a platform comes in when we look at machine learning and the scale that we can do that at on a cloud-based platform. And this is where we can also help organizations move to new platforms. In most cases, we see people moving to Office 365 as a future platform. And one of the things we really help people do is to get onto that platform, but doing so in a controlled and a managed and in a compliant fashion. And the final piece of this is really around exploiting the information that we have, whether that's realigning access, whether it's looking at those productivity gains, integration, or applying policy, and ultimately reporting as well is a very key part of that approach and making sure that the information is available. So these are the ways we see, and we've helped lots of organizations transform their data into a new and better platform. And this is where we really want to talk, just before we actually show you Datalift, and just talk about the opportunity that we see that there exists. So data activity, we're very aware of. Data has a very short life cycle when we want to use it, and after that it can become stale very quickly. But yet the cost that we pay over time for data is significantly high and is significantly constant. And while this figure may be higher than what you represent, we have a wide range of customers who are paying around £20,000 per terabyte storage per year, which is a significant cost, especially when you start to think that after the first maybe 12, 18 months, that data is no longer accessed. So we think there's a point at which where it makes sense to do something more intelligent with that data. And we look at that as an opportunity to take that information and usually move that into an Azure platform and put some control around that. So we're taking that data out of mainstream use. It's still accessible. Users can still retrieve and index that if they need to, but it saves us a significant cost purely by doing this. And we can start to turn something like GDPR, by doing some of these processes, into a real opportunity for the business and a real opportunity to be cash generative rather than seeing it as additional spend. So the platform we're talking about today is our Datalift platform. And this is where we use the power of Azure to really help organizations take control of data. We start with the non-compliant systems, with legacy ECM platforms, with file shares, with emails, and then we process that. We look for duplicate information, we look for redundant, obsolete, or trivial rot, as we call it, and then we look to bring compliance to that. We look to identify the personal information, and we look to transform the information that we have, and in doing so, apply policy to that, and ultimately move this information into a more appropriate store. So typically that's, again, looking at SharePoint, looking at Office 365, and that information that is no longer relevant, we then look to move that into an Azure-based archive through our cloud services capability. So I think rather than talking anymore, I think we should show it to you. So what we're going to do now is hand over to Eamon, who's going to give you a demonstration of how we can use our Datalift platform to provide GDPR compliance. So over to you, Eamon. Go ahead, Eamon.
So Simon mentioned one of the key things for the demo today is really to highlight the capabilities of Datalift and how we can really provide really powerful insights into all of your data held across your organization to really help you to then categorize, classify that information, wrap policy around it to really help you to manage it through and the remainder of its life cycle. So what we're looking at here is essentially a representative data set. So we actually analyze this incredibly quickly. So we've got almost 22 million files here that we analyzed, and that actually comes to just 16.6 terabytes of data. But because we're leveraging the latest in big data and cloud-based technologies, we're able to analyze and process data, millions of files per hour. And as part of that analysis and using some predefined rules, as Simon alluded to there, is we can really start to identify the levels of redundant, obsolete, and trivial information. So quite incredibly here, we've got 90% of this corpus of data is actually data that is of little or no value to the organization. And combining that with duplicate or levels of duplication as well across the environment, we're able to kind of highlight where data potentially is being used or shared internally, externally, but is inaccurate or out of date. So it's really important to start looking at how we can then categorize that data to apply policy to essentially manage that. So as part of Datalift as well, we can establish cost saving reductions around your data. So Simon mentioned AI Cloud Services, which is our intelligent archive solution hosted in Azure. We can use that to move that dropped data, as we call it, that duplicate rot data, into that platform, provide appropriate access controls around that, and surface that and present that in familiar environments such as SharePoint as well, but ensuring that that data is managed then accordingly. But what we can do is really start getting some deep insights into your data. We can start looking at where the files are located. We can start bringing in key attributes as well, such as size of content, who the data owner is, and some date-based metadata here as well. So, we can start sorting this information, start really identifying where those really large files are. What files are clogging up your environment? Should you really be keeping these on tier 1 storage, for example? Again, you can start also looking at where the really old data is, data that hasn't been accessed in years. Again, questioning why you're still keeping that, and again, looking at how we can treat that. So there's some key kind of statistics and information you can gather from the environment over here. We can look at the data in different perspectives as well. We can look at it in terms of file types, certainly in terms of GDPR. If you're looking at what types of files are going to be containing PII data, personally identifiable information, they're likely to be in emails, for example. They're likely to be held in Office-based documents, Excel, Word, all the kind of usual data types, PDFs, for example, that we're all used to. File size range is important, particularly if you're looking to move data away from unmanaged environments to managed environments. So looking at the most suitable place for that data. SharePoint Online, for example, Office 365. So taking the right sizing that environment for your data. And again, we can analyze across when your data was created and look at that growth profile over time. So that's really important. So what we can now do is really start looking at this data in more detail. We can sort of slice and dice and drill into this information. We can actually break it down in terms of the location in which that data is being saved and stored. So you can actually narrow down, say, into particular file shares or different areas of your repository. So what you're seeing there is quite incredible speed in terms of returning those results and refreshing that view based on that particular query there. So you can see all of these charts responding to that. What we can do as well is, let's say we're interested in very new data, the latest data, you can start making some decisions, potentially moving that as a priority into various content management systems. So you can see there that we're looking at everything that was created within the past year. And you can see that breakdown here as well. So just see as you're refreshing that here. One of the key principles of GDPR is about ensuring that your data is adequately protected and that the right people have access to that. Now, Datalift can really provide some powerful insights around that as well. We can actually highlight who has access to your data within across your environment. So we can actually say, using a particular key account over here, the Everyone account, sort of familiar Active Directory account, essentially, this is saying that all of these files that were highlighted here, everyone who is actually connected to the network has access to those files. So again, that potentially could pose a bit of a risk there because you're exposing data that you shouldn't. What we can actually do is combine that with another type of query. We can actually looking at file type extensions, and particularly what we classify as toxic data types. Zip files, PSTs, for example. So these are file types that would actually contain other types of files, so sensitive information potentially, attachments, records, information with personal data in there as well. But you simply don't know what's in there. So with Datalift, what we can actually do is like combine that with a query to show who has access, to say that we've got a number of files here that potentially could be downloaded and shared with individuals who simply shouldn't have access to that data. So, you know, we're highlighting kind of key risks here within the data set, and again, doing that very quickly and efficiently using the data set, the Datalift metadata refiner. Another aspect as well is just highlighting where permissions may have been broken. So inheritance, just put it in there. So we're looking using this field here, we can actually highlight where permissions have been broken within the actual corpus of data. So this again poses a risk because there may again be individuals who have access who shouldn't have access to this, or there may even be files that have been hidden from compliance managers or auditors who need to gain access to this information. So that kind of gives you a bit of an overview of the speed at which we can analyze data and look at this data. And again, what we're doing here is basically bringing any metadata field that we can establish and we can scan from your environment, and using that as a tool to actually view that data as well. So a couple of other aspects that I won't go into detail is really around classification of data. So we have a solution around being able to automatically classify data, and we use a number of different methodologies for that. So we use keyword extraction, machine learning, and also using various algorithms around regular expressions as well to manage data. And once we've categorized it and classified it, we can then apply the policy that we discussed. And that could be a policy to essentially manage a particular request around data protection. I'm just going to go into the e-discovery center over here that we've got within Datalift. And what we can do, this is very much a way of providing some special categorization around your data. So it can really start highlighting what data you have and where that PII risk lies within that data set. So we have a number of different categories of personal data types here. So we've got contact information, for example. So this can be anything from names, postcodes, it could be email addresses, IP addresses, for example. So what we're doing here is we're highlighting where that data is. And we're looking at where that information is being highlighted over here. So any PII contact-based data is highlighted. We've got some postcodes over here. What we can do is just click over here. We can see an email address, for example. So this is really allowing you to categorize across these types. Contractual information, that's really around credit card details, bank account numbers, anything you hold along those lines, financial information. Again, starting to go in the realms of sensitive personal information. And documentary and the special categories, again, looking at things like national insurance number, where passport numbers exist within your data sets, etc. So what we can do now here as well is actually look at providing a full subject inquiry, either doing it across a group of users. So you may have a list that you've downloaded from a CRM system, and you want to understand where these individuals may have PII data across all of your organizational data. So just to highlight this here as well, we can do an individual subject inquiry, for example. And here we've got actually a number of different inquiry types that we can reference. So a right of access, again, has been discussed today, one of the kind of key principles around data privacy and individuals within the public being able to gain access and understand what you have that you're holding around them. So I'm just going to create a subject inquiry here for this individual. And we're going to set up an inquiry date here as well, just to highlight that. And you can put some other aspects such as date of birth in here, for example, just to highlight some other credentials to kind of help discover that information in more detail. I'm just going to go ahead and save this. So that system's going to go away and scan my data set and actually produce a subject inquiry then on that individual. and that can just be listed here under this set of existing inquiries. So what we've got here is obviously the name of the subject and obviously the type of inquiry. So this is a right of access inquiry. And more importantly, we've got the inquiry date. So again, the stipulation of GDPR is that any inquiries that come in, they need to be facilitated within 30 days of receipt. So again, we can manage that through via the AI Datalift tooling. And again, as I just scan through and look at some of the categorizations here, we can see that in terms of contact-based information, we've got quite a number of files pertaining to this individual, and we're holding some key information around them within these files. So email addresses, for example, postcodes, those sorts of things. And again, here we're actually holding some bank account details on this individual as well. So, you know, very powerfully and very quickly, we've actually been able to categorize and create a subject inquiry on this individual. So what I'm going to do now is actually submit this for approval. So I'm going to provide this so an information manager gains receipt and a notification that there's an inquiry that needs to be acted upon. I'm just going to quickly refresh the screen over here. And then we'll notice that as an information manager, I've got a number of tasks that I need to review. And here, as you can see, we've got that right of access request pertaining to Arthur Ramirez and the particular subject request he's put forward. So here we've got the review screen. You can see the actual individual files over here. We can see the policy that's been applied. So this is the right of access policy and some other key information. But now I've got the ability as an information manager to actually approve or reject this subject inquiry. So I'm just going to go ahead and approve that. And that's going to go away, and now I can see within my list of completed tasks, I've actually got the right of access there, and I'm just going to click on here just to kind of highlight the outputs of this. So, you know, not only are we facilitating this subject inquiry, we're also producing a report here of all the relevant information that we hold on the individual, which we can then provide them to evidence the access request that has been put forward. So hopefully that's given you a good overview of Datalift, and we've gone into some of the key aspects, some of the insights that you can provide very easily and quickly via the metadata refiner tool, right through to categorization of content, applying policy, and facilitating some of those key requirements that the GDPR specifies. So on that note, I'd like to return the session back to Simon.
Okay, thank you very much, Eamon. Thanks for that demonstration of Datalift. Hopefully for everybody on the webinar, that was a very practical demonstration. We could spend hours looking at Datalift. Some of the capabilities that it has in terms of helping people get a view of their data are fantastic. The data set that Eamon showed you there was 16 terabytes of data. We analyzed that for an organization in the space of about 5 hours, literally overnight for them, and the next morning they could come in and see that data and start to play and look at that data. One thing I should just say at this point, if you do have any questions about anything you've seen or anything you've heard so far, you do have the capability through our webinar technology to send us a question. There's already some questions coming through, but if you do have any other questions, please feel free to ask. And we will look at those shortly, and all the panelists can respond to those. So just before we do that, what I want to do is just have a quick recap around what we've seen. And hopefully you've seen that from a Datalift perspective, that using a combination of our technology and the Azure cloud, we've been able to meet some of these principles. So in terms of, first of all, letting organizations understand what they have and looking at ways that they can make this accessible, and do so in a very transparent way, looking for those files that maybe shouldn't be hidden, and looking for those files that are breaking policy and bringing them back into control. It allows us to build a platform whereby we limit the purpose of the information that we are managing. We can find data we shouldn't be keeping, and we can expose that, and that also brings in the data minimization principle as well. And ultimately, what we want to show is accuracy. So when we're looking for data, we can be very accurate, we can be very in particular about the data we're identifying, and tagging that appropriately with the right people, with the right data types within the content as well. And we see all of this being a way to help an organization reduce its storage volume, so that, again, we can not only get the benefit of being compliant with GDPR, but we can also significantly reduce the cost associated with that. And in everything we're doing here, we want to provide a platform within which you can be, you can have integrity in terms of your process, but also ensure the confidentiality of the subject matters data that we are uncovering and putting control against that. And in all times, the whole Datalift platform and the whole dashboard that Eamon was showing us is really geared around enabling that accountability, so that you can control and you can report back, improve compliance with this platform. You've seen, hopefully, also that we do this in terms of the conversation that we were having with Katinka around the Microsoft view in this, where we can help people discover, we can help people manage, we provide that level of protection and that level of reporting. So if we need to go back to people, we have that capability. So in all times, we're working in conjunction with our partner to ensure that you get a holistic end-to-end platform against this. And finally, what we think this means for you as organizations. First of all, we believe it gives you that GDPR compliance across all of the unstructured data that you hold, regardless of where that is. We have over 40 connectors to platforms for Datalift to look at that data, whether those are old legacy on-premise platforms, whether they're bespoke platforms, or whether they're cloud platforms. We can look at all of those for you and bring some insight on the data. We also see this as a great way to look at reducing costs, your costs around storage, around management, and even in e-discovery. If we can identify that 70% of your data is effectively redundant, when it comes to e-discovery, if we can sideline that information, it means you're going to have a much more cost-effective and much faster process around understanding what data you have. We also think it reduces broader risk within the organization when we look at the other regulations, over retention, broken inheritance, IP protection. There's so many ways we need to understand the risk our data poses and bring that under control. And with the concept of having better data, it really gives us the opportunity to have cleansed data sets enhanced and really classified for the purpose that we need them. Again, making it better for your organization, which will drive the transformation that you want to achieve as you look at your information strategy. And we think this is a great opportunity to use GDPR to drive a lot of transformation within organizations. And this platform will also make you ready for the next GDPR, whatever that next regulation that you are going to face. We think this provides a great opportunity to put you on the right path to future compliance with other platforms as well. And finally, we think this can be done very quickly. I mentioned how long it took us to do that 16 terabyte data set. We've run this data platform up to levels of over 1 billion files in terms of being able to analyze and bring out insights back for organizations. So we're looking at petabytes of data being brought under control as well. And we think we can do this very quickly. We've proven this for many organizations, just how quickly we can bring insight and control over their data. And a shameless plug before we get into questions, we do provide a lot of consultancy around GDPR in terms of helping organizations get to where they need to go. And we have a range of pre-packed modules that we will happily discuss with you at any point. So that's kind of the formal part of the presentation over, and what we're going to do is move on to any questions that people have. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to shout or to type them in, and we'll address them. So here's the first couple of questions that have come in. First question is really about sharing information with customers. So if somebody has requested a view, do we have a workflow process that we can let people see that access to that information? As Eamon showed us, you can see that information in terms of the report we generate, but we also provide a portal through which that information can be made physically available once you've gone through that approval to allow people to access that data, to review it, and effectively be happy that they have seen all of the data that you hold on them. And for the various different types of inquiry that you might have, we also have appropriate methodology as well. So if, for instance, the request is to get rid of information, that sort of right to deletion or right to be forgotten, we can provide a report that shows that information is being deleted as well. The next question that's come in here is asking about the security around this platform and within Azure. How does that work? We built our solution entirely on Azure because we believe it's a very secure platform. In fact, Katinka, this might be an opportunity for you to give us your view on the security around Azure.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'd probably think about three things when it comes to Azure security. So firstly, the security by design principle. So Microsoft operates a security development lifecycle that kind of addresses security basically from the development phase. And then we have something called the operational security assurance sort of framework, which builds on that, and then it ensures secure operation through the whole lifecycle of the service. And then finally, we've got sort of the Azure Security Center, which basically extends kind of continuous security health monitoring to the customers. Microsoft also runs some of the world's largest online services, so we've really built a set of best practices around making sure that our services are secure and robust, that we're applying industry-leading encryption for data in transit, data at rest. And then finally, privacy and transparency has always been really, really important for us, and it's a way that we try to differentiate ourselves. So, for example, at step one, we're quite clear in our contracts that the data that a customer puts into our cloud services will always belong to that customer. Yeah, that would probably be my summary of Azure security.
Thank you very much, Katinka. I know there is a massive amount of information available within the Compliance Center on Microsoft's website in relation to security, in terms of all the penetration testing and everything else that goes on. And certainly, when we were looking for the platform to host our capability on, for us it was the only place, given that it was one of the first platforms to also, our first cloud platforms, to also be deemed suitable for official sensitive data here within the UK. Next question coming in, is this only for large data sets, or can this work on any size of data set? We're completely open to any size of data sets. We run this for customers with a few terabytes of data, right up to customers with petabytes of data. For us, there is no differentiation against that. It will work and scale. And again, that's one of the benefits of Azure, is that scaling capability that we get. So there's nothing that we are that is kind of outside the realm of possibility for us. Two more questions. The first one is, can you look at other data sources? Yes, we have a lot of data sources under management, so we've got over 40 connectors for various data platforms. We also can integrate with CRM systems, so when it comes to identifying effectively the clients or the subjects that you want to go and do that GDPR inquiry for, as you'll have seen through Eamon's demo, there is an ability to do a group subject inquiry, which is effectively taking a feed from a platform or from a spreadsheet or wherever, and processing that automatically to go and identify a wide range of individuals and the data pertaining to them. And the last question we have here is this only available in the cloud, or can this also be made available as an on-premise solution? The Datalift that you've seen is an on-premise platform, and we think that really is the future, certainly across all of our customers, whether they are central government, local government, pharmaceutical, banking, oil and gas. They're all moving into using the cloud as the primary source of data management, really, because in our view, and certainly in terms of what Katinka has been saying as well, it is, the world is cloud ready, and the platforms are certainly providing a lot more capability and are a lot more scaled now to manage the platform. So we think cloud first. However, we do have capability. We do have some organizations whose data will never make it to the cloud purely based on the security of their operations. And for those customers, we do have on-premise capability as well that can drive some of the same capability as well. So I think that's, given the time, that's really all we have time for in terms of questions. If there are some other questions coming in, and we will pick those up and we will email you directly in response to that. So what I want to do is say a massive thank you to Katinka for joining us today from Microsoft, and also to Eamon for his demonstration, and thank you to all of those who attended the webinar. This will be available on demand afterwards, so you can show this if you need it to other colleagues. But thank you again for attending the webinar today.